My prototype was in pieces on the conference room floor when I realized I was the only adult left in the building. Picture this: $1 million client sitting stiff as a corpse while my director, Chad, yes, his real name, because of course it is, shoved the demo hardware into a trash can like a toddler mad at his Lego set. Utter failure, he barked, all red-faced and performative. He was auditioning for a soap opera called Men Who Don't Understand Tech but Yell Anyway. Everyone laughed except me. I just sat there, frozen, wondering if this was how you got fired or institutionalized. Let me back up. 14 months ago, I was stupid enough to care. I was the one who volunteered to take on the unsexy problems: latency in the legacy system, client feedback loops that looped back to hell, junior developers who couldn't spell merge conflict if you spotted them the M. You know, the type of workplace where success means everyone above you takes credit, and failure means your name gets stapled to the blame like a warning label. Welcome to Helix Solutions, where your bonus depends on how well you babysit a founder's niece who thinks agile means yoga pants. And hey, before I go any further, let me ask you a tiny favor. If you're listening to this and nodding because your own office is a clown car on fire, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and give this story a like. Seriously, 95% of folks don't, and it's the only thing keeping the rest of us from rage quitting and starting a goat farm in Montana. Anyway, back to the burning wreckage of my professional dignity. I was hired as a product lead, but functionally, I was duct tape. Every disaster got shoved onto my desk with a sticky note that said, "Just fix it, Sharon." We had this prototype, an integrated analytics dashboard with real-time cross-platform syncing. Sexy in theory, but a beast to build when your team includes an intern who accidentally deleted half the staging environment because he thought RF meant refresh. I worked weekends. I missed my sister's second wedding, gained 8 pounds from stress snacking string cheese in the server closet. And still, I believed in the damn thing. It worked. It really worked. But I started to get twitchy about a month before the demo. One morning, I opened my inbox and found a final partner agreement v9 real final PDF attachment, courtesy of legal. Standard stuff until I scrolled to section 9.2. It was gone. The IP clause, our protection, guarantee that the client would retain full rights to the tech, vanished like free donuts after a staff meeting. I flagged it to Chad. He grunted something about streamlining the language and we'll fix it later. But later never came. I checked the document history. It had been updated twice in 1 week, both times during off hours. I asked around. Legal was silent. Like horror movie silent. I even tried the assistant GC at the coffee machine. She pretended not to know what clause 9.2 meant. That's when my gut started doing backflips. So I did what every anxious, underpaid tech worker does when they smell a setup coming. I covered my own ass. I pulled up the original agreement, printed 2 copies, had one timestamped with the internal system clock and the other notarized at the UPS store next to the vape shop. I put them in a manila envelope, sealed them, stuck it under the potted plant in my cubicle like it was the nuclear codes. Chad, meanwhile, was doing his best to turn our pitch into a frat party. He invited the client's CEO to Topgolf. He looped in his golf buddy from business school to co-strategize. He kicked me out of the demo prep meetings entirely. "It's just optics," he said with that plastic smile HR consultants probably teach in lying school. "You're more valuable behind the scenes," which was code for, "You're not hot enough to sell this thing, and I don't want you correcting me in front of important people." And still, I stayed, like a fool, because I thought if this lands, maybe they'll finally see my worth. Maybe all the caffeine-induced heart palpitations and crying in the women's restroom would translate into a promotion, or at least a raise. I believed in the work more than I believed in myself. That's the trap, isn't it? They don't have to chain you to your desk if they convince you that leaving means giving up on something you love. The morning of the demo, I was told, via Slack, no less, that I wouldn't be needed. Just monitor from your desk. We've got this. My name wasn't on the calendar invite. My face wasn't in the prep deck. And when I pulled up the live stream, what I saw wasn't just sabotage. It was character assassination. I had introduced my prototype like it was a defective microwave, couldn't answer a single question about how it worked, then dramatically declared it too unstable for enterprise use, and dumped the hardware in a trash can like he was throwing away a moldy burrito. The client sat there, blinking. One of their engineers actually tried to intervene. He knew the system worked. We'd tested it together. But Chad bulldozed through him like a linebacker on a caffeine bender. At the end of the meeting, I wasn't mad. I wasn't sad. I was clarified, like butter. All the noise burned off, and what was left was simple. They thought they could bury me. They forgot I was holding the shovel. Because that clause they deleted, the one they hoped no one would notice, it was the only thing standing between them and a six-figure lawsuit. And the only person with a signed copy was me. 2 days before the demo, got a meeting invite titled Quick Sync Client Readiness. I clicked it with the same optimism you'd click an IRS audit. It was just me, Chad, and a half-empty can of Monster on his desk that smelled like melted cough drops. He didn't look up, just motioned for me to sit with this smug little smirk, the kind you'd slap off a toddler if they weren't blood-related. So, he started, dragging the word out like a used car salesman with a quota to hit. Decided to simplify the presentation lineup. Optics, mostly. You know how clients are, they like consistency, a clear voice. Too many cooks and all that. I just blinked. You mean I'm not presenting? He nodded, real casual, like this was just weather talk. You've been instrumental, Sharon, truly. But we want to keep the messaging tight. Let me do the talking. You've earned a break. Me translate that for anyone who's never been elbowed out of their own project by a man who uses synergy as a verb. You're too smart to control, too necessary to fire, and too inconvenient to credit. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just said, got it, and left the room before I could start laughing like a maniac, because he just handed me the playbook. If I wasn't going to be in the room, I wasn't going to be part of the fall. Or the cover-up. That night I went home, poured a glass of $2 wine, and pulled up the partner agreement from our shared drive, the one marked final but modified 6 times in 3 days. I scrolled straight to section 9.2 and confirmed my worst suspicion. It was gone. In its place was some vague legal jargon about platform alignment and usage scope, which is corporate code for we'll steal your work and call it collaboration. I checked the file history. Deletion was logged 3 nights ago, timestamped at 2:13 a.m. by Chad's login. He'd done it from the office VPN, probably after one of his Red Bull-fueled strategy sessions, which, in practice, meant yelling at the junior devs until one of them cried, and then ordering pad thai while pretending to know what version control means. I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry. Just disappointed in myself for not seeing it sooner. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't a mistake. This was a chess move, and I was supposed to be the pawn that wandered off the board, so I made a move of my own. I dug into my personal archive, the one not stored on company servers, because I'm not a complete idiot, and pulled up the version of the partner agreement I'd printed back when we first finalized the client terms. I remember doing it out of habit, like always backing up your files before someone from marketing decides to clean up the folders. That old printout still had section 9.2 in clear black and white ink. IP ownership shall remain with the client in the event of platform cancellation or internal dismissal. It was legal armor. And now it was leverage. I timestamped the digital copy by uploading it to an independent vault I'd used during a consulting gig that service tracked edits and metadata to the millisecond. I also printed a fresh physical copy, signed and dated it, and slipped it into a sealed envelope. Then I drove to my friend Lisa's notary kiosk, the one inside the UPS store next to the sketchy check cashing joint, and had it notarized. Lisa didn't even blink, just stamped it and said, "Somebody piss you off again?" I nodded. She handed me the seal and said, "Good." Burn M, back at the office. Chad and his little entourage of yes-men were running around prepping the demo room like it was the Super Bowl. They were arguing over whether the slide deck should use deep dive or strategic overview as a section title. Meanwhile, the product itself, the thing I'd poured blood and brain cells into, was being reduced to talking points and buzzwords. They didn't even ask for my input. Not once. One of the interns actually said to me in the kitchen, "You're lucky, Sharon. You don't have to deal with the pressure." Right. I only had to build the entire thing from scratch while juggling 6 vendors and a code base that crashed if someone sneezed too hard. But sure, no pressure. By the time demo day came around, I was ghost. My name was wiped from the meeting agenda. The calendar invite said leadership presentation. The prototype I built was now labeled Chad's Solution, which felt like calling a rotting banana a Michelin star dessert because someone stuck a toothpick in it. But I wasn't mad. Not really. I'd moved past that. What I felt was prepared. I watched the demo from my desk with the quiet focus of someone watching a magician perform with their pockets turned inside out. I knew every flaw in the performance, every misstep they'd take, because I'd designed the damn thing. And I watched with a calm sort of detachment, sipping my coffee, notarized envelope nestled in my desk drawer like a nuclear option wrapped in manila. Because here's what Chad forgot in all his peacocking and posturing. The client didn't just want flash. They wanted security, assurance, contracts that made sense, rights that protected them. The minute legal sniffed around, they'd notice the gap. And when they did, someone would have to answer. And someone would have the original, me. 10 minutes into the demo, I could tell Chad hadn't read a single technical brief. Not one. He was swaggering through the presentation like a game show host who wandered into a nuclear reactor, smiling, gesturing wildly, and saying things like synergize the dashboard workflows for optimal user pipelining. Words that meant nothing, but sounded shiny if you didn't know what a product was actually supposed to do. I sipped my burnt breakroom coffee and stared at the live stream feed from the big conference room, watching my career dislocate itself in real time. The client's team, half of whom I'd worked with personally during integration tests, looked like they'd rather be doing dental surgery on themselves. One guy, Andrew, an infrastructure lead from the client side, kept glancing around like he was waiting for someone to jump out and yell April Fools. Others weren't even pretending to hide their confusion. You could hear keyboards clicking as they fact-checked Chad's nonsense on the spot. He skipped every vital step in the prototype walkthrough, didn't show the real-time data sync, ignored the customizable logic flows, completely butchered the API pipeline explanation, said something about pinging the backend cloud loop, which doesn't mean a goddamn thing unless you're trying to trigger a migraine. But the real kicker tried to demo a live deployment and failed, because he never asked me for the live credentials. He kept clicking. Nothing happened. The front end froze. The error banner popped up, missing authentication token. He smacked the trackpad like that'd fix it. The silence in the room stretched so long you could feel the oxygen levels drop. Then Chad said, and I quote, "Looks like our engineer forgot to update the staging path." Our engineer. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I just reached over to my desk, opened the drawer, and slowly pulled out a granola bar. If I was going to watch my intellectual property get publicly executed, I might as well do it on a full stomach. And then it happened. The moment. The one I'll remember longer than my own damn wedding vows. Chad, desperate to reclaim the room, walked over to the prototype, my prototype, sitting on the demo table, all polished and prepped. He picked it up, held it like it was radioactive, and said to the client, "Honestly, it's not ready. We were promised it would be, but it's unstable. It's basically trash." And with that, he dropped it into the office trash can. No dramatics, no laughter, just a soft plastic clunk, like he was throwing away an empty soda bottle. One of the junior PMs let out an awkward giggle. No one joined him. I sat there, watching through the live stream, frozen, not angry, not shocked, just hollow, like someone had scooped me out and left the shell blinking at the screen. That little piece of hardware wasn't just metal and code, it was mine. I'd stayed up nights refining the heat sink calibration. I'd rewritten the logging module 3 times because the backend devs kept forgetting to remove their test scripts. I'd personally integrated the client's data schema into the dashboard because no one else understood the lookup rules. Now it was in a trash can because Chad couldn't follow 3 lines of documentation. I muted the stream, sat in silence, and something inside me snapped, but not loud like glass, quiet like thread pulling tight. I turned back to my screen and opened my private cloud vault, the one I never told anyone about. I uploaded everything: IP transfer logs, timestamped commits, architectural flowcharts, notarized correspondence. Every receipt, every fingerprint of ownership. I labeled the folder, Failsafe Clause 9.2, because here's the thing about watching someone toss away your work. It changes you. It rearranges your spine. You stop begging for respect and start preparing for detonation. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into the room like a TikTok hero and scream. I didn't even text my sister like I usually do when I feel like a punching bag in a pencil skirt. Just started documenting. Every email, every commit, every Slack message where Chad took the lead and I was told to stay focused on back-end cleanup. I screen recorded the demo, captured the moment he dumped the prototype like day-old chicken. I tagged the timestamp. Saved it in the vault. Then I leaned back and realized something that chilled me more than anything Chad could have said. They think they've already won. They think I'm just a footnote. The silent worker bee, fixer who disappears after the cleanup. But they don't know what I know. They don't know I'm the only person who didn't sign the updated partner agreement. They don't know the clause they deleted is still alive in my copy. And they sure as hell don't know that by trashing my prototype in front of the client, they just made their biggest mistake on camera. Because intent matters in contract law. And public dismissal of an IP deliverable, especially one contractually tied to a client, opens the door to reversion rights. They handed me the knife. All I had to do now was decide when to use it. The Monday after the demo felt like walking into a funeral where you were both the deceased and the uninvited. I stepped off the elevator to a silence so thick you could hear keyboards breathing. Nobody made eye contact. Not even Marissa from HR. She's the type who once hugged me because my cardigan looked emotionally burdened. The energy was surgical, precise, like someone had gone around over the weekend and performed a personality lobotomy on the whole floor. People were speaking in clipped sentences. Slack messages came without punctuation or emojis, just cold directives. I wasn't assigned to the post-demo client debrief. No invites, no tags, no good job or we'll circle back. Been scrubbed clean from the narrative like a typo in a resignation letter. Instead, Chad forwarded me a Slack message with a single line. Assist Sarah and Brent with internal cleanup. Cleanup. That word hit different. Like I was the janitor assigned to mop up the mess he made while presenting my product as a defective prototype. The same prototype he humiliated in front of a client, publicly disowned, and yeeted into a trash can like expired yogurt. And now, conveniently, I was good enough to clean up after it, but not good enough to speak to the client. I didn't respond, just stared at the message, then minimized the window like it might catch fire if I looked too long. By noon, I was assigned a transition doc. Basically, a glorified grave digger's guide, redocument the product architecture for handoff. Brent, who once asked me if JSON was a type of granola, was now the official technical liaison. Sarah was overseeing strategic pivot communications, which is corporate speak for telling the client it was all part of the plan while praying they don't notice the panic. I did my part, quietly, meticulously, but with just enough ambiguity that they'd have to come crawling back in 2 weeks when the app's staging environment refused to build because they deleted a dependency I wrote by hand. And all the while I was watching. Not the people, the logs. See, Helix Solutions uses an internal document management tool, one of those overpriced platforms designed for compliance audits and digital trails. It tracks every document edit, every access, every red line, even if you roll it back or rename it to ignore this final real docx. The system has an admin panel that's supposed to be locked to directors and legal only. Supposed to be. But 6 months ago, during a company-wide access migration, someone screwed up the permissions matrix. I'd flagged it in a ticket. IT never fixed it, so I still had view-only access to the edit logs, buried under 3 nested folders in the back end, and one entry caught my eye. /client agreement /final /partner agreement v7. Docx accessed, 2:13 a.m. edited by, C. Matheson edit summary. Streamlined section 9.2, removed legacy language. There it was. Black and white, smoking cursor. I clicked to expand the red line view. It wasn't just streamlined. Section 9.2 was surgically removed. The entire clause, in the event of product dismissal or client rejection, all IP ownership reverts to the original solution architect if not properly attributed within 30 calendar days, gone. Deleted 3 days before the demo. Quietly. No memo. No cross-team alert. The clause had been drafted by the legal team's old general counsel, back when they still respected due diligence. It was designed to protect creators from being steamrolled when leadership tried to cut corners or offload work to third-party vendors. And now it was gone, thanks to Chad's 2 a.m. crime spree. He didn't just screw me in the room, he premeditated it. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled through my nose. My fingers tingled, not with fear. Possibility? He thought I didn't know. Thought he could delete a clause and gaslight me into believing it never existed. But digital paper has a memory, and I had a receipt, a timestamp, a change log with his initials, his ID, and the exact second he clicked the delete key. That's when my cold fury calcified into something sharper. Not just anger, intention. See, I'd played the loyal soldier for years, took the hits, stayed late, smiled through strategy meetings where half the time was spent debating fonts. But they'd made one critical mistake. They thought loyalty meant obedience. They forgot that I paid attention. So I started preparing. I backed up the redline logs, uploaded the PDF diff to the same private vault that held my notarized copy. I even exported the audit trail as a CSV file, just in case I needed a good old-fashioned paper trail to slap down in a boardroom one day. I said nothing. No emails, no warnings, no flare-ups in Slack. I just smiled when Sarah asked me to pretty up the diagrams for the new team, and nodded when Brent butchered an explanation of asynchronous sync calls during a dry run. They were too busy patting themselves on the back to notice the live grenade I was slowly rolling under the table, because while they handled client comms and performed crisis PR with words like pivot and alignment, I was becoming something else, a liability, and they hadn't even realized it yet. I met Walter in a strip mall diner with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who refilled your coffee without asking. Exactly the kind of place where power moved in whispers instead of linked in posts. Used to be the deputy general counsel at Helix before he retired early and escaped to a lake house in Sandusky to, as he put it, fish, garden, and never look at another clause again unless it's on a restaurant menu. But when I texted him a photo of the partner agreement, my version, with the IP clause still very much alive, he replied within minutes, "Lunch. Tomorrow. 11:30. Bring the original." Walter was the kind of guy who didn't waste words or pleasantries. When I slid the manila envelope across the table, he didn't even touch his coffee first. Just opened it with the same reverence you'd expect from someone defusing a bomb. He pulled out the printed agreement, gave it one glance, and immediately flipped to section 9.2 like he already knew where the rot lived. As he read, the silence between us thickened. All the ambient diner noise faded behind the sound of his pen tapping the edge of the paper, slow and rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. Then he looked up. "Don't let this version out of your sight." That was it. No wow, no Jesus, Sharon. Just those 8 words delivered like a legal verdict. I didn't need more. Walter didn't do drama. If he was spooked, then I wasn't holding a disagreement. I was holding a goddamn nuclear code. He folded the document neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and leaned in just enough for his voice to drop a register. "This clause was your insurance, wasn't it? You drafted it." I nodded. 2 years ago. After the AI licensing mess. He smiled faintly. "Smart. Very smart." Which is exactly why they tried to kill it. He poured cream into his coffee like he had all the time in the world, but I knew his mind was already 10 steps ahead, mapping the corporate fallout like a chess game with too many bishops. "They didn't send it to legal for removal, did they?" he asked. "Nope. Chad went in through the doc portal and deleted it himself." His brow furrowed. "That's breach of protocol. And if you've got an original signed version, time-stamped, with no intervening addenda," he trailed off, shaking his head like he couldn't believe their arrogance. "Then this version, your version, is binding. They're up the creek without a license, let alone a paddle." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. We didn't talk much more after that. Walter didn't need to explain what I needed to do. I was already halfway there. After lunch, I drove straight to the downtown office of a notary public I trusted. Not the UPS kiosk this time. This one was higher end, the kind that worked with estate attorneys and startups doing seed stage filings. The office smelled like printer ink and old law textbooks. The notary, a stern woman in her 60s with a wedding ring that could have doubled as a paperweight, took one look at my paperwork and said, "You'll want the extra seal for legal challenge prevention." "Yes, please." I handed her the envelope. She went through the process like a ritual, stamping, signing, scanning the pages into a digital archive, sealing the hard copy in a fireproof envelope, handing me a USB drive with the backup. I paid the expedited fee without blinking. Then I did one more thing. I uploaded the notarized PDF, complete with scanmer data and embedded hash, to my private vault and tagged it with a new label, failsafe, legal trigger 1.0, because I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was preparing my offense. That night, back at my apartment, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. Contracts, notarizations, the red line audit trail, a copy of the demo video with timestamps. It felt surgical, cold, precise. Not like revenge, more like surgery on a tumor the company didn't even know it had. I poured a glass of Pinot Noir and stared at the pile of evidence. This wasn't rage anymore. That had burned out days ago. What I felt now was something calmer, cleaner, like water slowly reaching a boil. They thought I was done, marginalized, assigned to cleanup. But they didn't realize I'd just redrawn the lines of engagement. The power was shifting, not in a headline-grabbing, fireworks in the boardroom kind of way. Quieter, more dangerous, because now I wasn't just the builder. I was the owner. The conference room was silent the way graveyards are silent, dense, still, and thick with the stench of something buried too fast. The client's legal team had flown in for a face-to-face. No more Zoom, no more recorded platitudes. They wanted clarity, documentation, and, as one of them put it, unfiltered answers from the horse's mouth. Everyone showed up looking like they'd aged 10 years in a week. Chad's tie was askew. Sarah was flipping through a branded folder like the answers might magically appear between PowerPoint printouts. Brent had the decency to look like he was trying not to pass out. And me? I sat in the corner, not invited, not introduced. A support staff, scribbling notes with a legal pad I didn't need. I'd brought it for optics, the way you carry pepper spray in a dark alley, not because you plan to use it, but because it makes you feel like maybe you won't get gutted. Across the table, a new face adjusted his glasses. The client's lead counsel, Jacob Lindholm. Polished, calm, a shark in a tailored suit who probably read corporate bylaws the way some people read romance novels. Reviewed the latest version of the partner agreement, Jacob said evenly, placing the document on the table like a ticking clock, and were concerned. Chad cleared his throat. Concerned about what exactly? Jacob didn't answer. He just flipped the packet open, licked his finger like someone about to turn the page on your future, and read aloud. Section 9.1, Platform Stability Assurances. 9.3, Service Level Support Guidelines. Paused theatrically. No Section 9.2, everyone stiffened. That can't be right, Sarah mumbled. It must have been rolled into no, Jacob interrupted. This version is missing the IP clause. That can't be right. He looked up, not confused, not angry, just curious, and that made it worse. Chad let out a wheezy laugh. Maybe legal streamlined it, probably a formatting update. Your legal department sent us this copy, Jacob asked. Silence. Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jacob calmly flipped the page closed and looked directly at me for the first time since the meeting began. He hadn't even acknowledged my presence before. Now, all eyes followed his line of sight like dominoes tipping toward a slow disaster. You still have your copy, right? He said deadpan. Not if. You still have it, like it was already a foregone conclusion. Every cell in my body went electric. My face didn't move. Not an inch. I nodded once. No smile, no explanation, no apology. Good, Jacob said, like someone just handed him the coordinates to a buried treasure. Because the absence of Section 9.2 makes the rest of this contract problematic. Chad finally spoke. Let's not overreact. Jacob cut in, still calm, presented and publicly dismissed a prototype whose ownership clause no longer appears in this version of the contract. If that clause was removed after signatures without client-side approval, then that's more than a formatting issue. That's breach. He let the word sit there. Breach. It echoed like a gunshot. Brent leaned forward, sweating through his dress shirt. There has to be a backup somewhere. Maybe IT archived the earlier draft. No need, I said quietly. First words I'd spoken in the meeting. Jacob turned to me again. When was your version signed? 14 months ago, before platform handoff. Fully executed. I have notarized hard copies and digital hashes with timestamps. He nodded. Was that version ever amended? No. I was never informed of any changes, nor did I sign off on any. Now the silence wasn't just thick. It was heavy. Everyone was recalculating, redrawing their understanding of the situation in real time. Chad was breathing like someone was inflating him from the inside. Look, let's just clarify a few things. Jacob didn't even look at him. He turned to his associate and said, pause all implementation until we've verified the validity of her copy. Sarah blurted, are you saying her version overrides the current contract? I'm saying, Jacob said, if her version is the only signed and notarized document containing Clause 9.2, then she, not your company, retains IP control over the solution you pitched us. You could practically hear the room exhale in slow horror. They hadn't just fumbled a clause. They'd fumbled ownership. And the only person in the room who looked remotely calm was me. I didn't blink when Brent turned pale. I didn't react when Sarah's voice cracked asking about collaborative oversight. I didn't so much as twitch when Chad muttered something about legal misunderstanding. Because in that moment, all their buzzwords, all their performative confidence, all their late-night red lines and strategic ice-outs collapsed under the weight of one simple truth. I had the claws, and they didn't. No drama, no victory dance. Just the knowledge that the shovel they used to bury me is now digging their own grave. The next morning, legal called a 7:30 a.m. emergency meeting, which at Helix was the corporate equivalent of summoning exorcists before the sun comes up. The invite just said, IP clarification urgent. No agenda, no speaker list. Just a Zoom link and a rising sense of dread. I logged in early, headphones in, camera off. One by one, the squares popped up. Jacob from the client's side, two of his legal associates, in-house counsel Todd, who looked like he hadn't slept since the Nixon administration, and of course, Chad, Sarah, and Brent, all arranged in a row like sacrificial interns waiting for the axe to fall. Let's get to the point, Jacob said once everyone had settled. We've reviewed every version your team has provided. None of them contain Clause 9.2, and yet the clause was referenced in pre-demo materials and client onboarding documents. That's a problem. Chad smiled nervously, like a man who just realized the brakes are out halfway down a hill. It's probably just a clerical error. There's a lot of versions floating around, no, Jacob said, and it was the kind of no that didn't invite follow-up. We've already concluded the latest documents have been altered post-signature without a formal addendum, which renders them invalid. We need the original. All eyes turned to me. I didn't say anything. I just clicked a button. On screen, I shared a PDF. File name, Partner Agreement Original Signed Notarized PDF page 12. Section 9.2. Highlighted in yellow, in the event of product dismissal, platform reallocation, or absence of appropriate attribution, intellectual property ownership of the original solution reverts to the registered architect listed on the signatory page. Signatory page. Sharon Lynn, Product Architect. Signed by me. Signed by the client. Dated, notarized, stamped, embedded metadata, hash matched to the vault copy, chain of custody intact. Todd squinted like he was trying to telepathically rewrite history. Jacob's associate unmuted. We ran the metadata through our validation tool. This is the earliest version with full execution. There are no intervening documents or amendments. This, he tapped the document on his screen, is the only legally binding agreement in our records. Jacob leaned back in his chair, which means Sharon Lynn holds the IP. The room went very still. No screaming, no panic, just the sound of reputations quietly collapsing like scaffolding with no bolts. Brent cleared his throat. But she's an employee of Helix. Not relevant, Jacob said. Clause 9.2 clearly states attribution is required for IP retention. Based on the demo call, the public dismissal of the prototype, there was no attribution. In fact, you disowned the solution in front of our leadership. Sarah jumped in. Surely we can negotiate some kind of retroactive clarification. I'm not here to negotiate with you, Jacob said. I'm here to clarify ownership. And right now, the product belongs to her. Chad finally unmuted himself. Okay, hang on. This feels like a miscommunication. Sharon, we're all on the same team here. We don't want to jeopardize everything we've built. I met his eyes through the screen. Not smiling, not gloating, just calm, everything I built. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but then he stopped. Because there it was on the screen in black and white. Clause 9.2, my name, my signature, their absence, their silence, their mistake. Jacob turned back to me. Miss Lynn, you currently under any NDA or binding employment clause that would prevent you from independently licensing this solution? No, I said. I'm an at-will employee, no non-compete, no NDA covering this product. Todd looked like he might throw up. Jacob smiled faintly. Then for clarity, we will be referring all further discussion of this platform's implementation to Miss Lynn directly. We cannot proceed with IP in question. Our compliance office will expect to hear from her by end of day. He ended the call, just like that. No yelling, no threats, just the sound of power changing hands. I closed the laptop lid slowly as if sealing a casket. The truth was out, the clause was real, and the product, my product, was no longer theirs to bury. It was mine, fully, legally, quietly. No fireworks, no speeches, just control. And that, I learned, is the most dangerous kind of power, kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It just waits, and when the moment comes, it signs. By Thursday morning, Helix Solutions was bleeding deals like a stuck pig. The Slack channels turned into a digital war zone, frantic threads from legal, ops, and BD, all orbiting the same black hole, the IP lockup. The client had hit the brakes hard. No next steps. No rollout calendar. No follow-up calls. Just one terse email from their procurement lead. Until IP clarity is resolved, we are placing all contractual obligations and payments on hold. We will not be proceeding under contested ownership. The leadership team tried to spin it internally, called it a temporary pause for alignment. But when a second client, one watching the same demo recording from last week, forwarded an eerily similar email, the tone changed. Fast, Chad was yanked off the account before lunch. No announcement, no farewell thread, just a quiet meeting with HR and a calendar that suddenly read OOO indefinitely. I walked past his office that afternoon and saw the cleaning crew boxing up a succulent and a novelty mug that said I am the strategy. Fitting. I didn't gloat. I just kept walking. Later that evening, as I was reviewing an old system diagnostic file, because some habits don't die just because you're vindicated, I got the email. Not from Helix, from Jacob, the client's lead counsel. Hi, Sharon. Given the latest developments, we'd prefer to continue negotiations directly with the actual owner of the platform. Please advise your availability. We'd like to resume contract finalization next week with you at the center. Not your team, not your company, you. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Not in shock, but in stillness. It wasn't just about the clause anymore. It was about legitimacy. The client had chosen, not the louder voice, not the higher title, the one who built the damn thing, and they wanted to make that choice official. The next morning, Helix's legal team, now suddenly very eager to include me in everything, sent over a draft of a clarification addendum. Their language was bureaucratic mush, re-acknowledgement of original contributions, temporary co-attribution, joint implementation guidance. I sent it back with 2 lines, no co-attribution. Retroactive recognition required. All future contracts will list me as sole product lead and original architect. They tried to push back. Todd called me directly, voice all brittle and forced smile. We'd like to find a collaborative middle ground, Sharon. No need to take this personally. Personally? I built the damn solution. They threw it in the trash, literally in front of our most important client. I didn't take it personally. I took it professionally. I let the silence stretch until it hurt, then said, send a new draft that reflects the ownership. You know the clause, click. 2 hours later, a revised agreement landed in my inbox. This time, the clause was there, bolded. Retroactive credit, sole authorship, implementation licensing routed through my LLC, a formal acknowledgement to be included in the client presentation deck. It was exactly what they should have done from the beginning. But it cost them a hell of a lot more now, and I wasn't done yet. I added one more clause, a formal public correction to be published in the company's quarterly shareholder briefing. 1 paragraph, nothing dramatic, just the truth, that Sharon Lynn was the architect and sole owner of the platform, that her original prototype, wrongly discarded, been reinstated as the official client solution. They signed, because they had no choice. And when the ink dried, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't brag. I didn't send a petty meme or dig through the office Slack history to repost Chad's old comment about how execution is a team sport. I just got back to work on my terms under my name. Ruthless grace. No revenge needed, just recognition. And the right to never again be erased from my own creation. Boardroom smelled like fear and lavender-scented cleaner. An overcorrection, no doubt, from the meltdown they'd hosted in here 2 weeks ago, when Jacob's team walked out and left their 6-figure pipeline dangling by a thread. I sat at the far end of the long walnut table, alone on my side. No badge, no branded water bottle, no Helix logo pen. Just me, a slim leather folio, and a single sheet of paper inside. Across from me sat the remnants of the old guard. Todd from legal, now noticeably less smug and considerably more moisturized. Sarah with her "we're still a team" smile trembling at the corners. And one of the board members flown in from New York, still checking his phone like a Hail Mary might land in his inbox. I didn't offer small talk. I just opened the folio and slid the agreement across the table like a magician revealing a trap card. This is the licensing contract, I said, voice even. You want to use the prototype? You can, under my LLC. Todd's fingers hesitated over the paper like it might bite him. This gives us implementation rights but not modification access. Correct. You'll deploy as is. Any future changes will be routed through my team. If you want build access, we renegotiate. Sarah glanced down the table. This is highly irregular. No, I said calmly. What's irregular is rewriting contracts behind someone's back, trashing their work in front of a client, and then expecting them to clean it up without ownership. The board member finally looked up. And the client? I slid a second document from the folio. Fully committed. They've approved pilot funding, but only under the revised IP terms. Their checks will come through me. Todd's throat clicked as he swallowed. You'll be paid directly? That's how licensing works. Sarah's voice cracked. We're still, technically, your employer. I met her gaze, not after this meeting. The board member skimmed the pages again, his expression morphing from disbelief to reluctant respect. If we don't sign, you lose the client, the product, the platform, and probably the entire vertical this quarter. He clicked the pen, then signed. One by one, they followed. Not because they wanted to, because they had to, because they knew I was no longer the person taking notes in the corner. I was the person holding the rights, the receipts, and the reins. When it was done, I stood, slid the signed copy back into my folio, and left the room without another word. No victory lap, no final jab, just the soft click of the door behind me as the air rushed out of that room like a balloon, finally realizing it had been popped. Back at my new office, a co-working space overlooking the city skyline, I placed the reassembled prototype on the center of my desk. The one they tossed in the trash, now gleaming under proper lighting, its components polished and humming with silent efficiency. It wasn't just hardware, it was proof that sometimes the thing they bury comes back wearing its own badge. I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the rooftops glowing gold in the late afternoon sun, and let the stillness settle over me. Not revenge, just justice. Next time you throw something out, check who owns it. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.